Live from Dr. Henry Armitage Memorial High School AV room. Welcome to episode 120 of the Horror Podcast. My name is Tyler and I run Signal Horizon, a magazine dedicated to exploring genre fiction in and out of the classroom.
And I'm Oren Gray, and I write weird stories about monsters and movies and ghosts and sometimes all of the above.
Very good. For those of you joining in for the first time, welcome to the Horror Podcast and welcome to Panic Fest. 2 years ago, I thought to myself, as a high school English teacher and a speech teacher, how could I better incorporate horror stuff into my classroom? And specifically, I knew that our kids loved scary movies. So why not meet them where they're at? So horror movies are here to teach us what they can. So the Horror Podcast was born as a way to gently encourage fans, audience members, teachers, and students to embrace their own inner monsters and explore some of the lessons horror has to offer. So every show that we have, all 119 episodes, are essentially broken down into three elements. What we're going to be watching, dark corners of the web, where we promote some free entertainment, horror entertainment on the internet. And finally, our essential question, which will take up the bulk of our time tonight. And we will do our best to answer that question and hopefully give you guys a little something to think about. This week, it's all about the class of 1999, which, if I believe, Warren, we were both a part of, yeah?
I missed it by 1 year. I was 2000. So they had phased out all the killer cyborgs by the time I was graduating.
That sucks.
Yeah, right?
Dude, that was the best year. Yeah. And that also is just one more way to remind me I'm the old man on this podcast. So awesome.
One whole year older. Good.
Dude, it feels like I'm 105 years old after this last year. So
well, I was about to say the last year was 105 years long. So, you know.
Yeah. It aged us all. It aged us all. But yeah, we're so thrilled that you have joined us on our pre-recorded episode. And I might just mention, as I will later, that you can catch all of our episodes live by simply following Signal Horizon on Facebook or Twitter. And we'll give you the link so that you can totally check out every episode. The new episodes come out every other Thursday. So if you like what we're doing here, if you're a teacher that wants some ideas on maybe some scenes, maybe not some full movies, but definitely some scenes that you can show, check us out. We'd love to hear your feedback. So Oren, when I was typing up the script, I wrote, what are we watching? We just recorded an episode last Thursday, so it doesn't give us a lot of time. Anything going on in your neck of the woods?
No, I since we talked last time, I have watched this movie that we're about to talk about, and that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, you haven't even like I'm thrilled to live vicariously through you as you attend this adventure in tabletop gaming, because I don't know a ton about it, but it looks cool as shit. Yeah. Do you have any projects that you're working on?
So I've got a bunch of miniatures lately, and I've been gluing them together, which I find really relaxing, weirdly enough. I don't paint. I can't do the painting, but I like gluing them together. And so I've been doing that this weekend mostly. I did a unit of Thousand Suns, which are basically their space mummies, essentially.
Okay.
From Warhammer 40K, and I took a really good picture of them. So it's on my Instagram. If people want to check out my Instagram, there's a picture of my most recent completed miniatures up there.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll include it in the script notes too.
Yeah,
so
sure.
You can see all the cool shit, because it's way cooler than anything I'm into. Although I am super thrilled. First and foremost, if you are watching this, then you've signed up for Panic Fest, which is unbelievably great. And I'm thrilled that they're able to do it again this year. We know that we're a bit in the hybrid model where some stuff is online, like we are right now, and some stuff is in the theater at Screenland Armor. I was just at Screenland Armor today to catch, I was so thrilled to catch it, Godzilla vs. Kong. First movie in over a year I've seen. Who thought it? It was going to be
the triumphant return to theaters would be Godzilla versus Kong. I mean, it's a good one. It's a good one to come back to theaters for. I mean, I haven't seen it, but conceptually, it's a good one to come back to theaters for.
Yeah, exactly right. So I have HBO Max, and we do all that. So I could have seen it when it came out like on Thursday, I think. But I was like, man, a big, wicked monster movie that is loud and bombastic and, it designed for the big screen. I was like, okay, I've had both of my vaccinations. I'm as comfortable as I'm ever going to be in getting back out in public. So let's do it. So I did it. It was amazing. I was so glad to grab a beer and sit in that wonderful old school theater and, pretend like things were back to normal, even though not exactly back to normal.
Yeah,
But.
not so much. We're getting closer.
So I know, from previous episodes, and obviously we're buddies, so I kind of know what aesthetic that you have. But are you a kaiju kind of guy?
Yeah, I mean, I love the like rubber suits and things, especially. So like a lot of the movies are bad. Let's not put too fine a point on it. Not that bad ever stopped me, as we'll get into on the movie we're about to talk about. But a lot of the movies are not great. But like I love the aesthetic of them. I love the sense that you get that like so. One of the things that's a problem with movies like Godzilla vs. Kong, as much as I liked some of the other recent MonsterVerse movies, is that when you look at the old kaiju movies, the great thing about them, right, is that when you strip away the movie, the plot entirely, what you get is essentially a bunch of people playing with toys. Right? You've got a guy dressed up in a big monster suit, and he's playing with like toy trains and cars and shit, and so that's fun. Like people playing with toys is fun, no matter what, even if the movie is otherwise bad. And that you lose that when you drop away the practical effects of it somewhat. But yeah. I like kaiju movies. They're fun.
Yeah, I think that's probably a great analogy. Both of my children grew up with YouTube and the ubiquity of like being able to watch, YouTube wherever you were at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both children have gravitated towards watching videos of other kids playing with toys. And I didn't fully grasp it until you talked about just now, like watching people play with toys is kind of fun, especially if they're toys that you think are cool. I
mean, so when I was a kid, and I still would if if the opportunity arose, I'm sure, I enjoyed watching people play video games more than I liked playing them. So I totally get things like Twitch, right? Where I don't do it, but I totally get it. Like I get the appeal of it. Of watching other people play video games, right? It's fun.
Yeah.
Especially if they're better at it than you.
Yeah, definitely. If they're in the bottom line is I'm so out of the video game biz that
they are.
That's like everybody.
Right. Yeah. It's fun. It's fun to watch other people play. It's fun to watch people have fun. So yeah,
Well, and if we're gonna explode that metaphor a bit more, right? At least with this movie, spoiler alert, maybe skip 60 seconds ahead if you know nothing about Godzilla versus Kong, but like I think every trailer has already spoiled it. Mecha Godzilla is in this movie and is, at least for a little bit of the time, like a giant remote control robot, right? And I thought to myself, it's pretty cool. If I had the opportunity to drive around Mecha Godzilla, I might just do that, So
yeah. I mean, and he looks kind of like he's made out of Kinects or something. This is the version of Mecha Godzilla, so
Yeah, why not? But I will say, to get to the kind of formal angle of it, I really enjoyed my time with the movie. It was like pretty much a tight run time. There wasn't a lot of... I think you had the review on Signal Horizon of Godzilla King of the Monsters, and like the Godzilla's badass in that movie, but the humans suck really bad. Like they're no fun, and their plot is boring, and
you could have fixed so much of it by just getting rid of that one guy, but whatever.
Yeah. So it's like everybody learned from that, and there are probably 6 lines uttered not about one of the monsters by a human being. And it's like, okay, so every motivation has to be driven by one of those 2 monsters. And it's like, okay, somebody's learning, like we're getting there.
Whenever Poochie's not on screen, people should be asking, where's Poochie?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I would say absolutely go see it if you have the opportunity to go see it in a big, glorious... I think the name of the type of screen that they have at Screenland Armor is Iris, which, which makes it like crystal clear and an absolute blast to watch anything that's designed for the big screen. So yeah, go see it. I think it's going to be out for a little while. If you feel comfortable doing that, go do it, man. Otherwise, you can check out one of a billion other movies that are playing here alongside us at Panic Fest. So
yeah, I think my first time back in the theater since October will be one of the movies at Panic Fest. So
very good. Which one? Just curious.
I'm pretty sure I'm catching Censor, like, for sure in the theater. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't know what else I'm catching in the theater and what else, I'm still working that out, but I'm pretty sure Eli and I have worked it out. I'm gonna catch Censor. So
love it. Yeah. You'll have to tell me what you think. Maybe we'll run into each other.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, so tonight's episode ostensibly is about education. It's about high school, which is perfect for me. I've been in public education for 17 years. I've been teaching in various high schools for that long. So this is my shit. I absolutely love it. I'm part cyborg. I can't wait to rip, bad students in half through the wall. Yeah. But before we get there, our dark corner of the web, the thing that we want you to check out that is entirely free, but really brilliant horror content, it comes to us by way of one of our favorite podcasts called Pseudopod. And what essentially they do is they contract out real horror authors, grab their short stories, and then have them performed with real voice talent so that you get really quality literature for free every week. And John Langan, who's one of my favorite authors.
Same here.
He's
absolutely.
He's just fantastic. He's got a great story all about the Mask of the Red Death, Edgar Allan Poe, and a classroom full of kids. And it's fantastic.
It's super good. It's super good.
It is episode 701. The name of the episode is Technicolor. So check it out. Tell us what you think. It's great.
Good. Yeah. I love it.
And I think really exemplifies why we like literature as much as we do, because that's one of those things that I just don't think you could ever adapt.
No.
For like a short film, or it's just too weird and out there.
I mean, I guess you could, but man, it would be strange. I don't even know.
Yeah. It would definitely be weird, but I think there's so much of the visuals, not to get too much into the story, but like it really is reliant on these pictures that are a little bit like color out of space, like they don't exactly make sense, but they kind of do. So yeah, it's like that magic eye shit, which in fact, I think Langan makes reference to the magic. Yeah.
It's been a while
and
since I read it, but
I hated those because I could never see it. I could never get my eyes to do that. So they'd be like, "Don't you see a submarine?" And eventually I'd be like, I see a freaking submarine, man.
Fine, I see a submarine. There were 4 lights or whatever.
Right. They were really torturing me, Jean-Luc Picard style. I see 4 lights. Yeah. It's good stuff. Who knew this episode would turn into Star Trek: The Next Generation? Probably most people that have at least listened to an episode or two. Okay. I think it may be time then to get to tonight's essential question, which is, what can the class of 1999 teach us about school safety? And before we get into the plot summary, let's take a look at our trailer for tonight.
In 1998, 6 million violent incidents took place in American high schools, including 29,927 teacher fatalities. The public school system has been reduced to a battlefield. But the Board of Education has just found a solution. Tommy! The perfect solution.
You're next, Mr. Cope.
For the class of 1999.
What are you?
The class of 1999.
These androids were supposed to educate the students.
Battle droids, Miles. Battle droids.
To graduate is to survive.
I love it. Let me just tell you, as a member of the class of 1999, none of us were that cool.
Aw. I just need to know as a teacher what kind of weapon your arm turns into.
Yeah. Well, it depends. I just cooked dinner, so my robot arm is still a whisk from the really yummy bechamel sauce that I created. Yeah. So, but normally it's a bazooka. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
I felt bad for the history teacher guy who just got a claw. Like everybody else is like, I shoot missiles. I'm a flamethrower. I got a claw.
Right. Like, come on, man. And if again, it had probably been 30, maybe not 30, but it had been 20 years since I'd seen it. So they are repurposed to like battle androids, right? Or
Right.
battle, whatever. So like somebody designed that claw. Like maybe it was like I don't know. He was the poor robot that had to go defuse landmines or some shit.
I mean, it was this close combat weapon, right? I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. You could stick a bayonet on it. And he just,
Right. It had a drill, I think, in the center because he like grabbed a person's head and like drilled them. I think.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
okay, so he's a little groovier than we thought, but
I mean, it's cool. It's just not like you got to really get in there to use that, as opposed to missile launcher. I mean,
right. As opposed to Pam Grier, who can take out a whole army of hooligans or whatever.
Right,
so.
with their flamethrower arm.
Yeah. Well, for those of you that haven't seen this movie yet, it is free to watch on Tubi, which is awesome. I think the last film we talked about was also free on Tubi. And they just do I think an exceptional job. You have to watch some ads, which kind of sucks, but there's a ton of free stuff there. And all you have to have is an internet connection to watch. So one more reason to cut cable.
Yeah, and a lot of it's this good trash like this. So.
Oh yeah, and I would say this is good, fun trash. Yeah. So the Internet Movie Database gives us a pretty brief summary here of this film. 3 ex-military robots are reprogrammed as teachers and secretly placed in a school where most students are part of organized gangs. They begin to respond violently to unruly students, and their military training starts to take over. So there are a lot of questions that we need to cover tonight. Chief amongst them being, how do you think this movie feels about public education in general? Because it doesn't seem great.
So I feel like, and I think in some ways this is maybe the most interesting interpretation of this movie beyond, like, it's fun to watch people crash cars into cyborgs or whatever. So about a decade before he made this movie, Mark L. Lester, who made this movie, also made Class of 1984, which is basically the flip of this movie, except that the students aren't cyborgs. But like, it's about so we have to talk about Stand and Deliver. So Stand and Deliver, right? You're familiar with, and all the variations. Anyone listening is probably more familiar with Dangerous Minds. But all the variations of like the well-meaning teacher who goes into the like inner city school and turns all the delinquent kids around with their well-meaningness, right? And so like Class of 1984 was about like this teacher who was essentially wanted to be that, but the students were unredeemable, and he ends up like killing a bunch of them instead. Like they end up fighting, and it's a big action thing at the end. And so a decade later, he makes this, which is basically that flipped. And in a lot of ways, this feels like a repudiation of that whole subgenre.
Ooh, I like it. Okay.
The notion that these students need to be redeemed or rehabilitated, but instead, like, what that's doing is actually just making them cogs in the machine. It's making them, it's taking away their individuality and making them drones.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have literal machines trying to make the students into machines, as what can't help but feel like a repudiation of a movie he made a decade before. Like that was just the opposite, the script flipped.
I found this whole idea, not only that the movie, but what the cyborgs represent, the fact that we are doing this movie now as part of a hybrid itself film festival, it is, the whole thing is very on the nose. But we live in a very conservative state, right? Both, you live in Kansas and I live in Missouri. We only live about, I
Right.
don't know, 30.
It's essentially one big, very conservative state.
Yeah, right. But like the treatment of teachers has been less than wonderful over this last year, COVID wise. And I love the idea that this movie starts out like dehumanizing the teachers, you know, or like,
yeah.
oh yeah, let's literally deprogram the humanity out of these teachers and see what happens, right?
Right. And it'll totally be better, right? This will fix the problem.
Right.
As if the teachers were literally robots.
Yeah, right. And I just needed one or two of them to say like, no, we've got to teach this. It will be on the end of course exam, you know, like the state of Missouri says, or where are they? Oh, Washington,
they're
right?
In Seattle. They're in Seattle, yeah.
The state of Washington says I must get through this, you know, or whatever. And then blow somebody up with a bazooka. It's like, it'd be perfect, right? Yep. Perfect. But I do think it has some really interesting things to say, even if like it happens by accident, you know? So one of the things that I wanted to point out is the idea of the panopticon. Are you familiar with the panopticon? Yeah, first as an idea by Jeremy Bentham as a way to create like a prison system, essentially, where the guard tower's in the center and can see out, and the prisoners can see that there's a guard tower, but they can't see in, so they never know when the guard is going to be watching. So theoretically, they were always going to be on their best behavior because they might get caught, right? So zoom ahead like a couple hundred years, and Michel Foucault, who is a postmodern philosopher and rhetorician, makes the argument that the government creates panopticon all the time, right? Uses the panoptic eye all the time, and makes the argument that it happens a lot in mental health and happens a lot in our school system.
Yep.
As somebody who watched my high school put up a whole bunch of security cameras in a central location that looks essentially like an octagon, right? I was like, wow, we are taking Michel Foucault very literally. And at least in this case, I mean, the teachers now are, you know, essentially part of the state and have no free will to really make decisions anyways.
Right.
So I don't know. Is it fair? Was that your experience with high school?
I mean, I don't know.
Did you get blown up by a bazooka?
I did. No, I don't know that I realized the extent of it, but like, you know, yeah. I mean, to some extent, yeah. Of course, it was. It was everyone's.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's for me, a lot of it came down to like realizing that my teachers, when I did finally realize that my teachers couldn't do what they wanted to do, like it wasn't that they were doing what they were doing because they were just adults and adults were assholes or something, you know. But like
sometimes true,
that's true. Right. But like, you know, I had favorite teachers like everyone does, and sometimes I would realize that like, no, they're teaching this because they have to. They don't like it any more than I do. Like,
yeah.
And that was jarring, I guess.
Yeah. I think also Class of 1999 engages in some discussion about the role of the military in school systems generally. And that's been an area that has been really uncomfortable for me because I've had some kids that have graduated and gone into the military and have done a wonderful job, and it's been great. And I've also had some kids that kind of got pressured and didn't have a good experience. And I'm very conflicted with the role of the military in school. I mean, in general.
I'm not.
Say it.
I'm not anti people who are in the military. I am anti like the military industrial complex, which is what this movie is actually critical of, right?
Absolutely.
Because there aren't any people in the military in this movie. You never see a soldier in this movie. You see literal robots, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's not even, you know, it's very on the nose about it. But like when I was in school, I can remember like in third grade, maybe, right? We would have soldiers come in and talk to the class.
Sure. Yeah.
about like how great it was to be a soldier, basically. Like they were trying to recruit third graders.
Yeah. Well, there's
ridiculous. Yeah. Like that's
there's a fair amount of like hoorah, that kind of stuff
right.
that happens. I do think it's in a very important distinction that like our characters in this movie in particular, right? Stacy Keach, who plays ostensibly I think he's the head of the Department of the Defense of Education.
Educational Defense or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But he operates much more like these kind of iconic corporate CEO types, right?
I think he's actually the head of the like company that made the cyborg.
Okay.
I think. Anyway, like it matters. But he has the best bad guy like
contacts,
contact lenses. Oh my god, they're so ridiculous and great. I love them. Every time he looked at the camera, I like cracked up. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it definitely felt like, hey, we got some of these. Let's see, let's try them.
Let's put him in Stacy Keach and then bleach his hair just white as shit.
Yeah, he's a strange dude, but I do think highlights that connection between the military, but also these private companies that are making millions and millions of dollars off of, selling these technologies, not only to like local police departments that we see like, happening right now, but also like theoretically in schools, you got to have, surveillance and all that kind of stuff. And, I think they've included that in all of these schools, or at least in this movie.
Yeah. Oh, and like, in real life, we have trickle down of that kind of stuff into all sorts of things where like movies make deals with the armed services to feature armed services things in their movie, and you've got product placement that way, and you've got video games that do the same thing, and just like there's levels and levels and levels of this like interwoven stuff. So I think it works to have them be repurposed military.
Oh yeah.
Cyborgs, besides just to give an excuse for them to have bazooka arms.
Yeah. Well, any excuse to have bazooka
right.
arms.
I mean, if I was going to make a teaching robot, I'd give it a bazooka arm.
You would have to.
Right.
But it needs to be one that can disconnect, and you could just like stick a dry erase marker in it, and then like Inspector Gadget or something. Mm-hmm. But I do think that idea that the military sells this stuff to private entities or public entities or whatever it may be is really important. And in that way, this is a silly, goofy movie, but that's a real topic that I think, deserves to be included in the conversation, if nothing else,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, so this gets lumped in a lot with movies that were Terminator knockoffs, right? Because the robots are cyborgs. They've got or androids, I think they call them, but they've got the humanoid exterior.
Right.
But it honestly, like, I don't know, spiritually has more in common with like RoboCop, right? Its politics are more closely aligned to RoboCops than Terminators, where it is very, very critical of, capitalism and corporate interest and the corporate / military, partnership that exists, and the way that trickles down into state-run infrastructure. I mean, it's definitely operating more in the RoboCop sphere than the Terminator sphere, despite the aesthetic similarities of the cyborgs.
Yeah. Well, and I think pulling that back to the movie then, so the one thing that I couldn't get beyond, right? The one thing. There are lots of things about this.
That's the only thing.
The big thing I like. So we've created these like lawless areas of the country, right?
Right.
And I forget what they're called, but they're like
free fire zones.
Free fire zones, right? First off, this is like so steeped in the culture wars of the 1990s that it feels like you could move this movie now, right? Like the GOP just released their essentially their running platform for midterm elections, right? And they were like, it's going to be about the economy and about blah blah blah. But then they listed the issues, and it's all like culture war stuff. It's all like not letting trans kids play sports and stuff that like regardless of what political lean that you have, like that's not about the economy, you know, like in no way, shape, or form can you spend that to be like, we need more free markets. Also, your trans kid can't play basketball. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? So, like, the idea that there are these lawless areas is right out of a playbook from like 2010, where like the right, far right in Europe were like, there are too many, you know, Muslim immigrants and they're creating their own societies and a bunch of other hogwash that wasn't true. But they had like literally used the term no-go zones to describe that. So the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah, no. And you could totally move it over to right now and just like, okay, so change gangs to Antifa, right?
Right, yes.
And change drugs to, I don't know, hormone blockers or something, right? And you're done. You fixed it. It's the same. It's the same story.
Yeah. Oh, you could just leave it as drugs, you know? Like you have, you know, you have what now with New York, I think 20 states have legalized marijuana for recreational purposes. You know? Yeah. Well, and that's why I almost included in our other movies that were similar to this, VFW, because it's got this like weird grungy post-punk like aesthetic to the bad guys that I found really interesting. But if you haven't seen VFW, it was one of my favorites of last year's Panic Fest. So yeah,
100 years ago.
Yeah, right. That's what it feels like. But I think it would be a really great companion piece to this one, you know, where the old guys kicking the young guys' ass in Class of 1999 are the bad guys, and then you flip that on its head for VFW, and the old guys are the good guys there, you know, or whatever. So, yeah. So, all right. My question is, what are the rules here, right? We have lawless areas, but still all these kids go to school?
So I loved my favorite bit, right? First of all, why do these kids even go to school if they live in the free fire zone? Why do they even go? And second, like you have this scene early on, right? Like one of the very first scenes in the movie, practically. It's literally right after the credits, where they have this like gunfire car chase, right? They have this like this rolling gun battle, right? And then immediately following them, the school bus comes through. Why the fuck are you running a school bus through that neighborhood? What the hell is wrong with you? They just were shooting machine guns at one another.
Yeah, like I'm relatively certain bus service is the first to go once you've labeled an area a no-go zone. You know,
like what? Who? Do they have robots driving the buses too? Because if not, what human did you get to drive that bus?
Yeah, because you know kids are always shittier on the bus, so it's like, oh my god, Jesus, yeah. So, like they still go to school, which doesn't make sense, but also they make a big deal about talking about how like the police don't go to the schools anymore, right? Like they're
the police not don't even go into the free fire zones, right?
Right. Yeah. So who are the people in the black helmets?
So I think they said at one point that like the Department of Educational Defense like subcontracted some like a private security firm or something to be those guys in the black outfits. I think they do make a haphazard attempt at explaining why there's like a security force.
Just imagine the politics that would go into that, you know, like the local police won't do it, so the federal government has to stick in you know the crawl that they have at the beginning, which is super indicative of like Escape from New York and Escape from LA. Like there's a lot of, some may say ripping off, some may say distilling the essence of those films to give us a good place to start. But yeah, I just had issues getting through the beginning part because I didn't understand the rules.
Yeah,
you know,
it didn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it was lawless, but also you didn't want to get in trouble because they beat the fuck out of you. So
yeah, it didn't make sense. And like
good.
It felt a lot again like probably two scripts at one time.
Okay.
Where like the idea of the free fire zones and everything was at one time separate from the idea of the like robot teachers, maybe.
Okay.
And these, I don't know the story behind this. It was written by the director and also the co-writer was a person who wrote a bunch of full moon movies. So this seems unsurprising to me.
Yeah.
Also, for those who have, this will surprise no one who has seen both of these movies. The director of this also directed Commando. Which, if you haven't seen Commando in a long time, Commando, like, I remembered as a kid Commando as being a fairly generic 80s action movie. Commando is fucking insane. Commando is bonkers.
I think the last time I saw it, I had to be under 10 in my parents' basement.
Well, watching it again as an adult, it is like, this movie is tame and credible by comparison to Commando.
Is Commando Arnold Schwarzenegger or is it Dolph Lundgren?
No, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
Okay.
I think at one point, even though he's supposed to be a regular guy, he might put his hand through a metal door and then tear the door off. I think.
Nice.
I mean, it's bonkers, that movie.
We'll have to we'll add it to our script list here. So if you want to see equally as bizarre movies, check it out. Okay, so one of the segments that we have towards the end of the show normally would be 4 movies, where essentially I pick 2 movies and Oren picks 2 movies that we think would either play well, would go great with a double feature, or simply would be kind of more of the style in the vein of the movie that we've talked to you about tonight. So, Oren, what are your 2 movies?
Well, I picked Class of 1984 because I talked about earlier why.
Yep.
And it's also pretty good. And then I picked Chopping Mall, which is another movie about kids being murdered by robots that are supposed to be providing security at a basically public space.
I like it. All right. Very good. Yeah, Chopping Mall is great. And another one, the Screenland Armor, every Thanksgiving encourages people not to go to Black Friday, but to come watch Chopping Mall in their big theater. So, yeah, that's high quality. Okay, so my 2 movies would be Slaughter High, namely because it's got this great kind of high school aesthetic, but it's also goofy as hell, and it's got pretty interesting side characters, and the villain's great in it too. So, but also I picked The Faculty, and here's why. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's just, and I would say it's a guilty favorite. I recognize it's not a perfect film, but it's just super fun. And, I'm working on a book, nonfiction book long term, but it is surprising how in the subgenre of high school horror, how few times the teacher is the monster and not necessarily a victim. Right. And at least with these 2 films, you have the teachers exacting some revenge on the hooligans that are, typically the ones causing all the grief. So I think at least in that way, it plays pretty well. So
yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this when we were putting this episode together, like how few, like, there's a lot of movies that are essentially the stand and deliver, only the teacher has to murder the students, essentially. Like, you have The Substitute, you have Class of 1984, there's a number of others where, like, a firm hand won't do it, you have to actually kill some people, right. And by people I mean children. Right. But there's not a ton, like you said, of movies where, like, the students have to fight the teachers because right. the teachers are trying to hurt them. Which right. is absolutely a thing that I think every student both kind of fantasizes about, but also, like, fears in some ways, right? Like, we're afraid of our teachers to some extent because they are authority figures and have power over us and are unpredictable and blah, blah.
No, and I think to get back to something we mentioned earlier in the episode, like, that's absolutely what Michel Foucault makes the argument. Ultimately, is power structures generally should be deconstructed, but the power relationship between student and teacher is super problematic and really difficult for students that may have oppositional attitudes already, or maybe great kids just have shitty teachers. Like, to actually grow and learn. So, right. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, and essentially, like, again, not to badmouth teachers to one, but, like,
go for it. No, I've heard everything this year.
When you get right into it, like, school is essentially like a gothic power structure, right? Where, you know, the one of the core underpinnings of the Gothic novel is that the protagonist is always in a power structure disadvantage, right? They're the help that comes to work in the big fancy manor house. They're whatever. And you know, school is inherently that, right? The teacher, literally to the student, as far as the student can tell, the teacher has functionally unlimited power over their lives while they're in the school.
Yeah. Well, and to explode that idea maybe even further, I might make the argument that schools are just as likely to be big haunted houses as, you know, any other building might be, right? Which is why historically, kind of teenage horror movies at least partially take place in high schools. I mean, hell, Nightmare on Elm Street, I think Freddy was actually burned in the boiler room of the school, right?
I don't remember if he originally was or not. Like, that's definitely how we all remember it. I don't actually remember if that's what actually happens or if that's... I don't remember.
Yeah.
A huge chunk of it does take place in the school. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, and when you think of it, it makes sense. We spend, the majority of our waking time in school, right? We're there more than we're in our houses when we're awake.
Yeah.
And of course, our narratives are going to take place there, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, and in that way, I appreciate any time, even with as schlocky and goofy as this film is, it's offering some nuance to that traditional story. So, hey, man, more power to it. Yeah. Now, that being said, every episode we like to bring somebody else on to give their take on this film, and that someone is always the anonymous Letterboxd user who leaves a 0.5 star or a 1 star. In this particular instance, our anonymous Letterboxd user has left a 1 star review of this fantastic film. Do you want to read it, or do you want me to?
I can do it.
All right, do it.
All right, so it's a fucking travesty. I was obsessed with Ninja Turtle in 1990 instead of this beautiful, grimy nightmare. There's very little of merit worth discussing, but the fact that it was filmed on location in Seattle was a big plus. Also, shouts to the level of cynicism that imagines the end game of education as cybernetic surplus war equipment versus teenage drug gang warlords in a hot war. Strong recommend. Tremendous performances all around.
1 star.
That's a glowing 1 star review there.
I appreciated. He's like, I'm gonna recommend everybody see this movie, but it's gonna be a 1. You know, like I can't elevate my star rating with it all. But I like sometimes we will feature a Letterboxd user that doesn't get it, right? Like there's just a dumbass.
This person seems to get it.
Yeah. I love the end game of public education being that. Yes, that's perfect.
So well, that actually reminds me of something I wanted to bring up, which is that again, we talked about this when we did Split Second recently.
Mm-hmm.
It is telling to me again that this movie was set in 1999, right? It was made in 1990. This is what they imagined the future 9 years away.
Yeah, 9. Yeah.
That is a level of nihilism like that we only had in the 90s, right? Was within 10 years, lawless gang zones and cybernetic murder teachers, 100%.
It is amazing to me in looking back on that era, late 80s, early 90s, like the number of movies presented in a dystopic future, you know? And we're not talking hundreds of years. We're talking 10 or 20. Yeah. So when people bitch about the culture wars and that kind of stuff, like I'm down for that conversation, but I think it was way worse, you know, back then when we were like, oh, if we keep going on this trajectory, then, you know, the only ones that are going to save us are cybernetic guidance counselors.
Cybernetic murder teachers. Yep.
Yeah. Who can nuke the whole high school if they have to. Yeah. So, I mean, as bad as we think things are, they could be much, much worse. Anything left to say about the class of 1999, Oren?
So I only have one thing left to say, and that is, so throughout this movie, there are a bunch of signs on the walls everywhere, just like you have in real schools. And one of those signs, I wrote it down. One of those signs, where did I put it? Okay, one of those signs says, "Whack keeps your school a safe place to learn." I need to know more about whack. I need to know what it is.
I have two theories, okay? Number one, that one of the gangs is called Whack.
Sure.
Of which case that would be the worst gang name ever, right? Like, what do you belong to? I'm a part
Whack.
of Whack. Yikes!
So
right?
Our two actual named ones were like what, the Blackhearts and the Razorheads, I think.
Right.
So not a whole lot worse.
Yeah, you could be a Blackheart, you could be a Razorhead, or you could be Whack.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Or I thought maybe it was like one of those designer drugs, and it was just the argument like you needed to load yourself full of whack and like people would get along more, which I think kind of makes sense. Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
But why? Like those looked like official school signs.
Yeah.
Those weren't graffiti.
Yeah. Well, and then my own pet theory is that because anybody that's participated in public education for more than a year or two will know every year is full of brand new initiatives that typically all have some sort of letter abbreviation.
Stupid acronym. Yeah.
Right. So like this year, make sure that you write your whack on the board, like in whatever it is. So yeah, in my mind, like the entire school has fallen apart. Okay. But this, like, the building principal is still like, oh no, we are still going to have our educational initiatives every year, despite the fact that 12 teachers died in their classrooms last year. That is my own pet theory. That the whole world
seems like the most reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
whole world's gone to shit, but you still have to write your essential question up on the board so that everybody knows what's going on. Yeah, I love it. All right, Oren, where can they find more of your stuff on the interweb?
I am Oren Gray on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, where you can come make fun of my Letterboxd reviews if you want to.
It's
and
fun.
So on, and at orangray.com.
Very good. Well, you can find more of my personal stuff on Twitter. I'm at Ty Unsel, where I tweet about politics and horror and sometimes the horror of politics. But otherwise, if you enjoyed checking out the Horror Podcast tonight, you can find us on any podcatcher. But we would love it if you could like and subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. We always need all the help that we can to, kind of boost our own signal, if you will. But we would also appreciate it if you go to signalhorizon.com, check out the content that we have there. We have a YouTube channel where you can catch some back episodes of the Horror Podcast. But if you follow us on Facebook or Twitter, we will have all the live episodes that you could possibly shake a stick at. We're always looking for film recommendations, for audience feedback, or if you want to write and you think that's your bag, you can send all of those inquiries to Tyler at signalhorizon.com. So I will answer whatever email that you send, even if it's like, hey, you suck and you need to cut your hair, which, would essentially be what my 14-year-old tells me every day. That's not really true. He saw King Kong with me, or Kong versus Godzilla today, and totally dug it. So, that was cool. So next week, you see what we're talking about next week, Oren?
I did.
Yeah. Next week, we would love it if you could have a great time at Panic Fest, see all the wonderful movies that you can in person in Screenland Armor, if that is your bag and you feel safe. Otherwise, check out all of their virtual content. But check us out this next Thursday, so it would be essentially like the 15th, I believe. Thursday at 7 o'clock, we are going to be talking about the movie Popcorn.
Yay.
So it's yeah. We all say it's time to go back to the theater if you've been vaccinated, if you feel comfortable, and there's no better way to get reintroduced to your theater than checking out the classic horror film Popcorn. So until we see you next time, have a great time at Panic Fest. Have a lovely weekend. Class dismissed.